This seminar is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Consult with your medical provider for medical advice or treatment. Although the presenters try to keep the information in this seminar as accurate and timely as possible, the speakers and Mather Hospital assume no duty to ensure the seminar is error-free. The speakers and Mather Hospital are not responsible or liable for any claim, loss, or damage resulting from you viewing this seminar.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our HealthyU Webinar Series. Today's topic is holistic ways to manage stress. At any time during the presentation, please feel free to enter any questions you may have using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will answer as many questions as we can within the time allotted once the presentation concludes. Your questions will always remain anonymous. And today's presenter, I bring you Marie O'Brien. So Marie, let me just get you set up, and then you're good to share your slides.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, Jonathan, are you able to see my slide in a good view?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, super. All right, so thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to be sharing our topic, a holistic approach to managing stress. My name is Dr. Marie O'Brien. I'm a holistic and integrative nurse practitioner, and I'm also the Director of Integrative Care and Pain Management here at Mather. So being that this is Go Red for Women's Month, you see I'm sporting my red jacket. Stress really affects women, and stress can have a profound impact on heart health for women. During trying times, women may be less likely to make their own health and mental well-being a priority. So we are at many times more at risk for the negative impacts that can result from stress. According to the American Heart Association, stress in women has been linked to heart problems, headache and migraines, many stomach conditions, obesity, difficulty getting pregnant, challenges with our menstrual cycle. So there are many challenges that women face when they're exposed to stress that is not managed. Chronic stress impacts so many people. In 2023, the NIH actually took a look at stress, and these are some of the statistics that have been shared with us from the NIH. Related to chronic stress, how it impacts chronic conditions, as well as the collective trauma that we all experienced as a result of the 2020 pandemic. So as you can see, stress is higher in those people who are 18 to 34 years of age. And more than 10% of people have seen an increase in chronic disease and mental health challenges. I found this really profound. 75 to 90% of provider visits have been related to, have been associated with stress-related concerns. So really a big challenge, and that's why the American Heart Association makes it a priority, especially during Go Red for Women's Month, to highlight the impact of stress, as well as ways in which we can help calm down our stress. So a growing body of research shows that good mental health can really improve our heart health and reduce cardiovascular risks, while poor mental health can definitely increase the risk of heart disease. A little bit late in terms of when we look at studies, but there was a study in 2017 that was published in The Lancet, which is a highly regarded medical journal. And this study found that high levels of stress really predicted the development of heart disease, which was independent of other risk factors. The challenge is that when we experience stress, and we're going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, but stress activates our body's fight or flight response. So that fight or flight response, that's what happens to us when we are in imminent danger. So if we were walking through the woods and we saw a grizzly bear, the body automatically shifts into this fight or flight response. And the fight or flight response is actually not a bad thing. And we're going to also discuss this in a few moments. But the fight or flight response really is designed to help protect us. And when this fight or flight response kicks in, it has the capacity to increase our blood pressure, increase our heart rate. It puts our body into high alert. It also creates a low level of inflammation. Now, there's a lot of literature and a lot of buzz, especially if you spend a lot of time on social media, Instagram, and all of those types of sites. There's a lot of buzz about the impact of inflammation. And often we hear this term inflammation as being a negative thing, right? So we eat anti-inflammatory foods. We're always looking at ways to downplay the impact of inflammation. But at its core, the inflammatory response is actually really important. That's what allows us to heal if we cut ourselves. It's what fights infection when we get a cold or the flu. So our immune response is linked with that inflammatory response. However, too much inflammation is the problem. So all that negative buzz that we hear about, the negative impacts of inflammation, it's when we're exposed to this inflammatory response for an extended period of time. In heart disease, when people have coronary artery disease and heart disease, inflammation within the vessels can be a negative, that can really result in negative consequences. So our fight or flight response, when it's occurring for a long period of time, it can really cause multiple medical issues, including issues with our cardiovascular system. So before we go any further, let's actually discuss what stress actually is. So stress is a response to a perceived threat, challenge, or life change. It is a physical and a psychological response to any demand. So when our bodies are put under demand, we need to respond to something quickly. We have an infection can cause stress in our bodies. Any kind of emotional response will cause stress. So anytime the brain perceives a threat, our bodies need to be physically and mentally ready to respond to whatever that demand might be. It is a state of psychological and physical arousal. So as we talked about before, this really is linked to our fight or flight response. And it's important to recognize that stress is a response. So the word stress actually describes our response to a real or a potential threat. And I think that's very important to reflect on that as we move through our discussion today. That when we experience stress, it may be as a result of something that is real, right? So an actual threat. So you're in the woods and you encounter a grizzly bear, you are definitely under a real threat, and your body needs to be prepared to either fight, but I'm assuming most of us are not going to try and fight a grizzly bear, but we probably will try and flee. That's our flight response. Or we have an infection, or we have an injury, or we may be experiencing stress at work. So maybe there's a tight deadline that we have to meet, or maybe we are thinking about something that might potentially cause us to be in harm or feel vulnerable, and that will also cause this stress response. So this is the response to a real or perceived threat. And when that happens, our body is in this high state of energy or arousal as we are prepared to either fight or flight. Okay, and that heightened level of energy or arousal can be present for several hours, even after the threat has passed. So stress is something that is actually in us. It's something that we perceive, and it's our body's response to that perceived or real threat. So I don't want you to take this in the wrong way. So it's important to realize that the stress response is absolutely helpful. All stress is not bad. Stress is actually a good thing. Stress is helpful for us to be at peak performance. The stress response helps the body ready itself for times when we need to be at peak performance, like we said before, running away from a bear in the woods, tackling a deadline at work. If we have to give a speech or we have a deadline at work, these things require us to be at peak performance. So the stress response is what helps us get to that point of being at peak performance. It allows our heart, our lungs, our bodies to be ready to perform at its optimal peak performance. So for very short periods of time, this stress response can help us accomplish tasks or perform at these higher levels. The problem comes in when the stress response actually becomes our way of being. It becomes our normal or our standard. So if you look at the diagram that's on the screen, eustress is good stress. That's, the stress that's going to help us do good things, meet those deadlines, and protect our bodies. The problem is that after a certain amount of time, if we live in long-term stress and stress becomes our way of being, we move from this good stress or eustress to distress, meaning that stress now has a negative impact and negative health consequences on our bodies and our minds. Now, in day-to-day talking with our friends and family, we tend to speak of things like depression, stress, anxiety, as if they are all interchangeable or describing the same thing. And I would like to point out that this is really not the case. Stress and anxiety, although they seem very close, they really are not the same thing. Both are emotional responses, but stress is typically caused by an external trigger. Now, this trigger can be short-term, such as we talked about before, a work deadline, or, excuse me, perhaps we had an argument with someone we care about, or maybe we are worried about a financial issue or, something of that nature. Or even a chronic illness can cause stress. People under stress experience mental and physical symptoms. They might be irritable, angry, they might feel fatigued or really tired, have muscle aches and pains, issues with digestion, difficulty sleeping. So all of those are symptoms of long-term stress. Anxiety, on the other hand, is defined by persistent, excessive worries that don't go away even in the absence of a stressor. Anxiety leads to nearly the identical set of symptoms that you might see in stress, like insomnia, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, muscle tension, irritability. Both mild stress and mild anxiety both respond to similar coping mechanisms. Physical activity, eating a good diet, good sleep hygiene, self-care, all of those are very good coping mechanisms that can help us with our stress. But with anxiety, as mild anxiety can be helped with those things as well. But if your stress and anxiety do not respond to simple management techniques, such as some of the things that we're going to talk about today, or you find that your stress or your feelings of anxiety are really impacting your day-to-day function or mood, I would urge you to speak with your healthcare provider, and we're going to give you some more resources at the end of today's presentation. So stress generally will respond to these simple interventions that we're going to talk about. And anxiety is typically more internal, meaning that it is your body's reaction to stress. And it's a persistent feeling of maybe apprehension or dread that doesn't go away. And it interferes with how you actually live your life. So I know this seems like a really scary slide, but in essence, I just wanted to share with you some of the physiologic things that happen in your body when we are exposed to stress. So this is not meant to be too intimidating, but just to drive home the point that when there is this increase in stress, or even just some mild stress, these are the things that happen in your body. So your pancreas will stimulate more insulin production, your adrenals go into overdrive, your sympathetic nervous system really kicks into high performance mode. And we can see many different things, changes in your blood pressure, changes in your blood sugar. So many different things, retaining of sodium and water. So people might even become a little puffy, right? So some edema during long-term stress. So lots of things happen in our body when we are under stress that's not managed. But important to remember, stress, when we experience something that's stressful, that stress response occurs when the trigger, whatever is causing stress, whether it's real or perceived, whether you're running away from a grizzly bear or whether you are thinking about something that's stressful at work, the stress response only occurs once the mind has filtered that information, and then the body responds to that information. So all of these bodily responses occur after the mind makes sense of what that stressor might be. So stress needs to pass through the filter of the mind to actually occur in the body. So your brain really has a big impact on how we respond to stress. Research actually confirms that our imagination is a neurologic reality that can impact our brains and bodies in ways that really matter for our well-being. So if you were to imagine a barking dog, a spider, any perceived threat, your brain and body will respond just as if it was the real thing. So if you put enough thought into whatever the situation may be, your body will react. So whether you actually see a real grizzly bear, you see that bear, and this bear that you're looking at on the screen is a little scary looking. So seeing that bear for real, so again, you're looking at a picture, so not quite the same thing, but if you were in the woods and you were to encounter this bear, your brain will automatically kick you into fight or flight, and your body will respond to the presence of that bear. However, if you were faced with walking in the woods, right, you don't see the bear, but perhaps you're going, maybe you're out camping and you're going to take a walk in the woods. And if you are concerned or worried that in these woods, there may in fact be a grizzly bear walking around in the woods, you don't know for certain, but there could be. Your brain has the capacity to get your body ready to fight or flight. So that's that nervous sensation that you might feel when there are things that are uncertain. You might feel your heart rate increase a little bit. You might breathe a little more rapidly. That is your stress response, even though there is not a true threat that is right in front of you, such as the grizzly bear. And this was actually proven. There was actually a study that took place at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Also, the Icahn School of Medicine did a similar study where they actually had study participants go into a functional MRI. So that's an MRI machine that can take very detailed images of your brain while you are awake and thinking. And they had the study subjects imagine that there was a threat. And what they found when their study subjects imagined a threat, so they're in a safe study environment, they're having an MRI taken, they were prepared for the MRI. While they were engaged in this MRI experiment where images of their brain were being recorded, the researchers actually found that imagining a threat stimulated the same area of the brain as if there was a real true threat. So I thought that was very, very interesting and very telling. So when we are experiencing stress, stress has an impact on our body. It can cause headaches, make us more at risk for frequent infections, cause our muscles to be tense and tight. It can cause us sometimes to feel a little short of breath. Sometimes if people are under long-term stress, they may develop rashes, they may develop stomach challenges. So stress impacts the body. Stress also impacts the mind. So we worry, we have muddled thinking, our judgment is sometimes impaired. It can impact our sleep. So often people under long-term stress might report that they're having frequent nightmares. They might have a very negative mindset. They might be quick to make a decision that perhaps isn't in their best interest. It can also impact our behavior. People under long-term stress might say that they are more accident prone. It can impact the appetite, or either lose our appetite, or for some people, they term themselves stress eaters. So perhaps they're eating when they're not truly hungry. It may cause challenges with people consuming more alcohol than is healthy. It can impact sleep, restlessness. People who engage in smoking will sometimes say that they smoke more often when they're feeling more stressed. And then it can also impact our emotions. So when people report that when they're feeling stressed, they lose their confidence, they might be a little more fussy or irritable, feel maybe depressed or apathetic, apprehensive about maybe trying something new. So all of our body, our mind, our emotions, and behaviors are all impacted by long-term stress. So although short-term stress, so brief periods of stress that calls in our stress response, is helpful, when we are exposed to stress long-term, it can have a negative impact on all aspects of our being. And it's a multi-directional relationship. So our thoughts, when we think about something, it impacts our feelings. It also impacts our behavior and our bodies. And all of these things fuel off of one another. So if we behave in a certain way, so let's take, for example, we said that long-term stress can impact our behavior. So perhaps we either have a loss of appetite, or maybe we might consider ourselves a stress eater, where maybe we consume food when we're not truly hungry, but because we are stressed. That behavior impacts our physical body. Then our physical body, when it's not feeling good because we're not consuming high quality, nutritious food, that's going to cause us to feel a certain way. And then that in turn will perhaps make us think thoughts about ourselves that are not necessarily positive thoughts, which in turn fuels our behavior. And we can take any number of these symptoms, any number of these consequences, and we can see how they can impact one another. So what can we do about it? We know that long-term uncontrolled stress is not helpful. It's not good for our thoughts, our emotions, definitely not good for our physical body and our heart health. So what can we do about it? Well, there are many, many tools to help us manage stress. And many of these are simple and easy to implement, and they only require a really small time commitment for many of them. So the first simple intervention that I really love about stress, about ways to mitigate stress, really has to do with reframing your stress. Thinking about what the cause of your stress actually is, and then perhaps looking at it in a different way, or reframing the stress that you're experiencing. Often when we experience stress, it really is an experience that we are creating in our own minds. So if a situation seems stressful, it can be helpful to take a step back and then ask yourself, why am I feeling stressed? What is the reason? Is it because we are perhaps concerned about what someone else might be thinking or how they might react? If that's the case, we need to remember or reframe that stress and realize that we can only be responsible for our own thoughts and feelings. Is there anything about the situation that we could change to make it less stressful? So perhaps we've taken on too much. And in taking on too much, if we look at our calendar and realize that we have indeed taken on too many to-dos, and it's that feeling of pressure to get the to-do list done. What else could we do to maybe make that less stressful? So perhaps we could delegate something. Perhaps we could ask for help. Perhaps we could use that two-letter word of no, that sometimes it's just too much. So reframing the situation. Why is this situation causing me to feel stressed? And is there anything we can do to make that situation a little less stressful? Remembering that our bodies do not know the difference between a real or perceived stress. So is this stress something that is truly real? It's a physical problem that's going to put extra, that's going to lead to our bodies needing to be at high alert. So are we in an emergency? Are we trying to get out of a dangerous situation? That is the real threat. And we need stress for that real threat. Or is it that we have put additional responsibilities on ourselves that perhaps we maybe can change or reframe, and so that we can look at it in a different way and perhaps not feel that immense feeling of pressure and stress that will have that negative impact on our bodies long term. If we are always walking on a tightrope and perceiving our world as stressful, it will always be stressful. So this is really the concept of another buzzword, which is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the scientific term or the medical terminology, meaning that our brains have the capacity to change and adapt. And once if we make something a habit, such as an activity or a feeling, if we make it a habit, our brain gets really, really good at becoming perfect at that thing we are practicing. So a simple example would be tying your shoes, right? Or riding a bicycle. When you were a young child and you learned how to tie your shoes or ride your bicycle, it seemed really, really hard or challenging. And then the more that you did it, it became like second nature. So it's like that saying, it's just like riding a bike, right? So you did it so many times when you were younger, and now you can just, if you're physically capable, able to get on that bike and ride it, even if you hadn't done so in a long time. Tying your shoe. You can probably tie your shoe with your eyes closed because you practiced it so much. If you drive to work the same route every single day, you probably have on some occasion gotten into the car, put on your seatbelt, backed out of your driveway, driven to work, and maybe you arrived at work and realized that you don't remember the drive at all because part of your mind was maybe thinking about something else. It happens when we are a bit stressed, but part of your brain has the route to work perfectly memorized. So you may not have been paying strict attention to the road, which I do want to say is not the safest way to drive, but I'm sure many of us have experienced that. Your brain became really adept and really good at knowing the road to work. So it's like second nature. So you just went and you ended up getting to work. When we are stressed, if we live in constant stress day in and day out, your mind becomes accustomed to that, and that becomes your routine. So the more that we practice feeling stressed, the more perfect we become at that practice of being stressed. So let's reframe the situation. And let's help our brains and our minds and our bodies practice a better way of managing that perception of stress and practice things that can help us feel more calm. Even when we are encountering something that perhaps is not super stressful, or if we are encountering something that is very, very stressful, if we have practiced our response to stress, so some of the things we're going to talk about in a few minutes, if we practice these things when we are not super stressed, it will be much easier to manage a true stressful situation that really should cause us to feel that stress response very profoundly. If we practice managing our stress at times when we are more calm, it will make it that much easier to practice or to implement these interventions when we really need them. So one of the first steps to managing stress is to recognize that self-care, which is at the heart of stress management, self-care is not selfish. Our brains are responsible for initiating the stress response. So anything that we can do to calm our thoughts and help us feel a greater sense of control can also help us calm the stress response. Likewise, our bodies are responsible to respond to the stress response. So anything that we do to improve our physical health can help us be more resilient and less impacted by the stress response when we need our bodies to be ready to respond to that event. So things like good sleep hygiene, good nutrition, movement, healthy relationships with our friends, families, and coworkers, and mindfulness. All of these things together can make a huge impact, not only on our mind, but on our bodies, so that we can be ready to manage any threat, real or perceived. So let's get back to our example of the grizzly bear. So just like your brain has the capacity to create stress, your brain has the capacity to mitigate or turn down the volume of your stress response. So rather than imagining that we are seeing as we're walking through the woods, rather than us seeing this scary picture of the woods, is there something we can do to whatever is being perceived as stressful? Is it really this dark, scary looking situation? Or maybe we could see through the trees and find something that's positive about the situation, rather than imagining that we could possibly be encountering something, rather than imagining that we are perhaps going to encounter something that is scary and violent, such as our grizzly bear. Maybe we can look at a situation and see the good. So that is, our imagination is so powerful. So trying to focus on where we can see light, where we can see fun, where we can encounter good, that is the first step to mitigating the stress that we encounter on a daily basis. There is a lot of research and a lot of discussion about the concept of mindfulness. And often, as a nurse practitioner, when I educate my patients about mindfulness or meditation, many of my patients will share with me that that is hard to do. Because we recommend mindfulness and meditation for many things in the hospital, as well as when patients are going home. And it's really tricky sometimes for people who have not experienced the concept of mindfulness. But in essence, when we are mindful or we practice mindfulness, it is anything that keeps us in the present moment. So your body is always present, right? We can't leave our bodies in the past. Our bodies are not in yesterday. Our bodies are here in this time, in this place. And our bodies are not in the future. So our body is present, but what about our mind? So often, and especially when we're feeling overwhelmed and stressed, often our mind is thinking about what happened yesterday, what happened last week, what happened several years ago, or we are worried. So we're ruminating about what happened in the past, or we're worrying and we're apprehensive about what might happen in the future. What will tomorrow bring? What's going to happen next week? What's going to happen next year? So there's a disconnect. Our bodies are here in the present moment, but our mind is someplace else. Mindfulness is anything that connects the body and the mind and brings them together in the present moment. So we're going to talk about some of these interventions that can do that. So there's many forms of mindfulness, and you can see on the diagram, even something as simple, and for some people, it's simple. I do not knit, crochet, draw, journal. I am not that type of creative person. But for those people that do, that can actually be a mindfulness practice. Knitting, crocheting, drawing, that creative practice where you are in the moment, just focused on what you are creating, can be a wonderful mindfulness practice that can be not only good for your mind, but good for your body. People who enjoy fishing, being in the moment, connected to nature, focusing just on what you are doing in the moment can be extremely powerful and beneficial. Some people enjoy music, either listening to music or creating music. Many people pray, and that is a form of mindfulness. Going to religious services where you are mindful with a group of people in the moment, just focused on that experience. And then we're going to discuss some of these other mindfulness practices in just a moment. These are some of the benefits: improved concentration, increased stability when there's chaos, the ability to cope with stress and enhance your performance, enhancing your clarity and your creative thinking, and ensuring that you are not just running on autopilot. All of these are positive benefits from being mindful. Now, one of the easiest ways to engage in mindfulness is breath awareness, focusing on your breath. And we talked a little, when we first started the presentation, we talked about that fight or flight response. So during the fight or flight response, one of the first things that changes when your body recognizes danger or threat is that your breathing increases, your rate of breathing increases. The depth of your breath may increase, or for some people, they may start breathing more shallow and more rapid. But when we start to think about a threat, your body will change your breath. Likewise, you can change your mind. If you start to think about something that is calm and peaceful, you have the capacity to change your breathing. Or if to something that's more beneficial. Or, like we said before, if you are thinking about something that's worrisome, you may see changes in your breath in a negative way. So likewise, if we physically change our breathing, we can then impact our mind. So just by focusing on our breath, taking a slow, deep breath in through the nose, allowing that breath to move down into our diaphragm, perhaps seeing our belly expand just a little bit. That breath, when we do that, can actually stimulate our rest and digest system, or our parasympathetic nervous system. So your vagus nerve, that's another buzzword nowadays, is the activation of the vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is responsible for that rest and digest, the opposite of the fight or flight response. So simply by taking 60 seconds to do some mindful breathing, focusing on what the breath feels like, coming in through the nose, going down into your lungs, recognizing that your diaphragm is dropping, that your body is calming, and then slowly exhaling. Doing that for about a minute can actually allow your body to have a profound relaxation response in just a minute. So I challenge you, the next time that you start to feel worried or you start to feel stressed in some way, stop, take a breath, breathe in, breathe out, and as you are taking that breath, reframe the situation. So for a minute, do some breathing. So whether you need to go into an office, go into the bathroom, go someplace to escape the situation for a moment, and practice breathing, reframe the situation like we talked about before, reflect on the situation. Is this something that I really should be stressed about? And then choose to approach the situation from a new point of view. It can be very helpful. So that is my challenge for all of you for this upcoming week. Meditation is another mindfulness practice. So meditation, mindful breathing, all of these fall under that mindfulness category. There was a great study or a great survey done by the National Institute of Health on meditation back in 2017. So I'm sure that pretty soon they'll be redoing this survey to see how many people actually engage in meditation. So back in 2012, only about 4% of the US population did any kind of meditation. And in 2017, about 14% of the population engaged in meditation. And just from a pragmatic point of view, talking to people, seeing patients in the hospital, I am willing to bet that a lot more people are currently using some form of meditation now after COVID. But there is a great benefit, including reducing blood pressure, helping with symptoms of anxiety, depression, irritable bowel, improving sleep and healthy behavior, and supporting healthy changes in the brain. So many, many positive effects of meditation. And there are different types of meditation. So transcendental meditation, which I actually have a dedicated slide. So many of these interventions we'll talk about briefly in the next upcoming slides, but extremely beneficial. So different types of meditation practices. So mindfulness meditation, so that's what we just talked about, being in the moment, being aware of your feelings, being aware of any sensations in your bodies, being aware of the thoughts and sounds that are around you or that might pass through your mind, and learning to accept your thoughts without judgment. And that is a key piece of mindfulness meditation, accepting your thoughts without judgment. Labyrinth meditation is a wonderful way to engage in a moving meditation. So sometimes people are averse to meditation or mindfulness because they don't like to sit still. Labyrinth meditation is a moving meditation where you walk through a labyrinth, which is one path. There's one way in, and you walk through the course of the labyrinth to the center. And then you get to the center, you perhaps leave anything that does not serve you at the center of the labyrinth, and then turn around and walk the same path out. The picture in the left upper hand corner is actually a labyrinth that's owned by the hospital, and on occasion we do in-person labyrinth walks. We do this a lot for the staff, and we have done labyrinth walks for the community as well. And there are labyrinths scattered throughout Suffolk County. Several parks and universities have a permanent labyrinth for people to walk through, and it's a wonderful, moving meditation. Transcendental meditation is a specific meditation practice that emphasizes daily practice, typically 2 times a day for 10 to 20 minutes, where your eyes are closed and you focus on a mantra or one word or concept. And there's lots of great benefits to transcendental meditation, a lot of research. But sometimes people find this type of meditation a little bit challenging when they're new to it, but practice makes perfect. So the more that you practice, the easier it becomes. Transcendental meditation views different levels of meditation, where it's sometimes described as proceeding through the ocean, where your mind, with an analogy, like you're proceeding through the ocean. So the floating on the top, where you're just observing your thoughts. And then as you go deeper into meditation, you see greater insight, you're more relaxed, you're more observant. And then finally getting to a very deep level of meditation, where people describe sort of losing themselves in the meditation. So after a great deal of practice, people are able to get to that deep level of meditation. There are also very simple techniques, simple mindfulness techniques. So what's described here is called a finger hold meditation, where you are mindful, and as you do this meditation, it can take just a few minutes. I'll just describe it shortly. So it's something that you could perhaps take away from this presentation. Finding a quiet place and then holding one of your fingers. So perhaps you start with your thumb, gently holding your thumb, just a firm enough grip where you barely feel your hand holding your thumb. And with your eyes closed, taking a breath in, focusing on what your thumb feels like in your hand, breathing in, breathing out, and just focusing on your thumb. And then moving from your thumb, taking 3 breaths on your thumb. And then as you complete that 3rd breath, then proceeding to your next finger, so to your pointer finger, gently holding your pointer finger, breathing in, breathing out for 3 breaths, and going through each finger until you complete a series of 15 breaths. So this whole process takes about a minute. And because you're focusing on your breath and you're focusing on your hand, it allows you to be more in the present moment. And people have reported profound improvements in their ability to manage their stress, doing this just 2 times a day. Another self-care or mindfulness practice can be the use of aromatherapy. I do need to point out that the use of essential oils are designed to enhance well-being. They don't treat, cure, or prevent disease. And we do not endorse the use of any essential oils to which you may have an allergic reaction or you might be sensitive to. However, when we use a scent that resonates with us, breathing in, focusing on that scent, so whether it's lavender, peppermint, lemon, or something that maybe you're using in your house, maybe you're cooking and there's a scent that's coming out of whatever you're cooking, focusing on that scent or that smell can help us be mindful in the moment. Tai Chi. There is actually a Tai Chi practice called Tai Chi Easy, which is very easy to learn, and it utilizes Tai Chi movements self-massage, breath awareness, and meditation. The Northwell Center for Integrative Medicine in Roslyn actually runs virtual Tai Chi Easy classes, and it's extremely beneficial for self-care and very easy to do. Yoga is another wonderful self-care practice. According to the NIH, yoga can have many benefits for wellness. Studies have shown that yoga relieves stress, supports good health, improves mental and emotional health, sleep, balance, and it also helps support a sense of community and socialization if you're doing yoga together in a group. Here at Mather, we have community yoga Monday evenings and Thursday mornings. Very beneficial for stress management. So I do want to point out that if you think that you are stressed, you probably are, because the heaviest burdens that we carry are the thoughts in our head. So being able to change those thoughts can have a profound impact on our ability to manage our stress. And I know we only have a few minutes left, so I apologize. It took a little bit longer for me to get through some of our slides. But I just want to point out that it's important to recognize when you may need more help. So if you feel like you might be struggling to cope, if your symptoms of stress or anxiety won't go away, it may be time to talk to someone who is a professional. There are many different things that can help people who struggle with uncontrolled stress. So if some of these things that we have talked about are not resonating with you, or you find that they are not helpful, you may want to seek out other interventions or other routes. There are additional things that we didn't talk about today: acupuncture or acupressure, Reiki, therapeutic or healing touch, therapeutic massage, self-massage, hypnosis, nutritional interventions such as withholding caffeine or limiting chocolate or high fructose corn syrup. But there's so many things that we did not even touch on today. But what I would like for you to take away from this presentation is that there are ways to expel your stress energy. So that's through movement, or there's ways to bring in good energy, such as mindfulness practices or meditation, guided imagery, etc. Stress is absolutely normal. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming. But if it feels like you can't manage your stress, or if your symptoms of stress interfere with your everyday life, cause you to avoid doing things, or seem to be always present, please seek some additional help. We have lots of resources here at Mather and through Northwell. Holistic care can support your well-being, mitigate stress, and help you feel empowered. But please speak with your primary care provider if you are truly feeling overwhelmed. Mather also has a mental health clinic. You can schedule time to talk to someone here at Mather by calling our central scheduling department. And on our website, we also have a screening tool, which you can access through our website. Cat Center for Women's Health has a lot of great resources, as does the Go Red for Women website attached to the American Heart Association website. If you have any questions, I don't know if we have any time for that. I apologize for going over time, but I really appreciate everyone's participation in our webinar.
Yeah, we have time for, looks like, one or two questions here, so we'll see what comes in. I know towards the end we had to go through it a little quickly, so I'll share the PowerPoint with everybody who attended, so you can go through it in your free time. So we'll just give it a couple seconds here. I know we have another minute. If anybody has any questions that aren't in your head now and maybe later, you can also just send me an email and I can forward it to Marie and she can answer it. But it looks like no questions at the moment, but we're gonna have to put an end to this. So I just wanted to thank you, Marie, for such a great presentation. I always love your presentations.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any additional questions, like I said, you can email them off to me at janderson25@northwell.edu, and I can send them to Marie for her to answer. Thank you all again for coming. If you'd like to view past HealthyU webinars, you can see them at www.matherhospital.org/healthyu. Thank you all so much. Thank you again, Marie, and have a great day.
Thank you.